You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is True Pizza Delivery Horror Story from the Night Shift. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. The first thing that felt wrong was the way the ticket printed. Not the sound, same dry mechanical chatter from the little Epson under the heat lamps, but the timing. It spat paper like it had been waiting, like it was impatient. I was reaching for a stack of wax paper to line a box when the receipt snapped out, curled at the edge, and slithered onto the stainless counter like a tongue. No one had touched the POS screen. The air in the shop was warm in that specific late-night way, oil-sweet, yeast-bready, a tired garlic fog that clung to your hoodie. The neon open sign in the front window hummed faintly, and every few seconds it made a tiny electronic click, as if it couldn't decide whether to stay alive. Outside, rain ticked at the glass in thin, lazy needles. The printed ticket read, "One large pepperoni extra crispy cash deliver to. Address notes. Don't knock. Text only." It wasn't the order that made my fingers hesitate. People asked for no knock all the time: babies, roommates, dogs, paranoid night shift nurses trying not to wake the house. It was the address line. It looked wrong, like it had been typed by someone who didn't know how addresses were supposed to sit on a line. The number and street were there, sure, but the city field was blank. The zip was half missing, the last 2 digits replaced by tiny squares like the printer had hiccuped. And in the corner, where it usually said online or phone, it just said, "No source." No phone number, no name, a normal glitch, explainable. Our system was old. The internet in this strip mall was a moody animal that bit at random. Still, I stared at the ticket long enough for the cheese smell to turn sharp in my nose. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new text from an unknown number. You got it? I didn't answer right away. I read it twice, then a third time like the words might rearrange themselves into something less stupid. In my periphery, the pizza oven's conveyor belt whirred steadily. The same soft, rubbery hiss it always made, pushing someone's thin crust toward the mouth of the heat. A radio near the soda fridge muttered through late-night sports talk, the host laughing too hard at his own jokes. "Ben," someone called from the back, voice muffled through the swinging door. "You see that? Ticket just printed." I swallowed. My mouth was dry, and it felt silly to be dry over a pizza ticket. That's when the front door chimed, and a gust of wet air came in with a man I hadn't seen before, tall and thin, hood up, rainwater shining on his sleeves like fish scales. He didn't come all the way in, just hovered in the doorway, letting the bell keep its cheap little ringtone, and looked around like he was checking for a specific face. I said, because that's what you say when you're behind a counter at 1 a.m. and you don't want to escalate anything. "We're open." He didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the counter, to the printer ticket, and then to me. The bell finally settled into silence. He nodded once, small, almost polite, and stepped back out into the rain. The door shut behind him, and the neon open sign clicked again. I exhaled through my nose. A rational person would have called it coincidence. A guy walks in. A ticket prints. Tech glitches. Life goes on. But my phone buzzed again. Extra crispy. Don't knock. Text only. Same unknown number. That was the undeniable break. Not supernatural, not impossible, just too clean. I picked up the ticket and walked it toward the kitchen window. My name's Ben Harper. I was 24, male, and I'd been doing pizza delivery in South London. For so long it had started to feel like a second skin. Not the glamorous part of London. Either this was the strip of neighborhoods where everything was a little damp and a little tired, where kebab shops and nail salons sat side by side under flickering signs, and where the roads were a patchwork of old repairs that made your car rattle like it was full of loose change. I worked at Mondo Pizza, a corner shop wedged between a closed-down bedding place and a laundrette that never seemed to shut, even when the lights were off. The night shift paid a bit more, and I needed the bit more. Rent didn't care about my optimism. And this is the part I didn't say out loud to anyone. I liked the hours because fewer people watched you in them. Fewer eyes, less judgment, less chance of running into someone you knew, which mattered because my private flaw was that I was a coward about awkwardness. Not danger, necessarily. Awkwardness. The kind that makes your face go hot and your tongue stiff. The kind that turns you into a fumbling version of yourself. I'd rather deliver pizzas to strangers at 2 a.m. than run into an ex at 6 p.m. and have to pretend I was thriving. Ben, the voice came again. Stop daydreaming, man. Eddie pushed through the swinging door with a plastic tub of sliced peppers. He was short, broad-shouldered, male, and had the permanently flushed cheeks of someone who lived too close to a friar. He was older than me by a decade and acted like it, equal parts tired dad and chaotic older brother depending on the hour. Eddie Rosso, 35, male, appeared at the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. He leaned over the ticket, squinting. What's this? Where's the name? Where's the source? Did you type this? I didn't touch anything, I said, and my voice came out too defensive. I softened it. It just printed. Eddie made a sound like he didn't want to admit he cared. System's been acting up all week. I showed him my phone screen, the unknown number, the message. Eddie's eyebrows lifted, and for a second his face did something small and honest, concern slipping through the usual sarcasm. Maybe it's one of those app orders, he said. Sometimes it roots weird. It doesn't say app, I said. It says I tapped the ticket, right at the blank source line. Nothing. The kitchen window behind him fogged with steam as Marco pulled a pizza from the oven, the heat lamp turning the cheese into a glossy, bubbling topography. Marco Klein, 19. Male, was our youngest, skinny and quick. His forearms dusted with flour like he'd been handling chalk. He leaned in, chewing gum, eyes bouncing between Eddie and me like he wanted to be part of the story. What's going on? Marco asked. Did someone prank you? Do I look like I'm fun enough to prank? I said, and he grinned because that was the closest I got to joking most nights. Eddie picked up the ticket and held it near the light. Address is in our zone, he said slowly, reading. But the city's missing. That's weird. Also, I added, and hated that my voice dipped. Guy just walked in and looked at the ticket. Marco's grin faded, like he knew. I don't know, I said. He didn't say anything. Eddie stared at the door for a beat, like he expected the guy to come back in. Rain rattled harder on the glass now, and a car whooshed past outside, tires slicing water, leaving a thin wake of sound. Could be nothing, Eddie said, but he wasn't convincing himself. Could be some idiot trying to pay cash without giving info. My phone buzzed again, a third text. It's paid in cash. Bring it now. Marco leaned closer to see. That's creepy, he said quietly, like he didn't want the words to become real. Eddie lifted his chin at me. We don't have to take it. If the system's bugging, we cancel. End of story. That would have been the easy choice. Throw the ticket away. Laugh it off. Get back to folding boxes and thinking about rent and pretending I didn't care about being seen. But the address, wrong looking as it was, sat in a part of my brain that knew the streets. A real place, a real route. It wasn't a nonsense string of characters. And the unknown number, whoever it was, had my attention in a way I didn't like. I glanced at the CCTV monitor above the soda fridge. The camera outside the door showed nothing but wet pavement and the trembling reflection of our neon sign. No hooded figure, just rain and streetlight. Text only, Eddie muttered, reading the note again. Don't knock, cash. He looked at me, and in his eyes was the thing managers don't say out loud. We need the order. We need the money. We need the shift to go smooth. The margins on pizza were thin, and the margins on people's patience were thinner. Marco reached for the pizza box with the large pepperoni in it, already cut, already smelling good in that salty, comforting way that made you forget you were tired for half a second. He held it like it weighed more than it did. So what? Marco asked. We taking it or not? Eddie didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, ticket in one hand, and listened to the rain, to the neon hum, to the tiny click that kept happening like the sign had a nervous tick. I felt my phone in my palm, warm from my grip. And we all understood the choice sitting between us. Ignore the weirdness and move on, or treat the weirdness like it meant something, like it could be a problem, and change our night because of it. Eddie finally spoke, voice lower. If we do it, he said, we do it smart. He looked at me like I was already halfway out the door. Ben, he said, you want to take this run or not? Eddie's version of smart started with a marker and the back of a grease-stained flyer. Text the number first, he said. Make them confirm the address in a normal way. Ask for a name. If it's legit, they'll answer like a person. Marco hovered with the boxed pepperoni like he was holding something alive. I opened the unknown thread and typed, Hey, this is Mondo Pizza. Can you confirm your name plus full address? My thumb lingered over send, and I hated that my pulse had crept up over something this small. I hit send anyway. The message delivered. No iMessage bubble, no read, just that blunt little checkmark like a door shutting. Eddie leaned in toward my screen. Call it. It's 1 a.m., I said. So, he said, if they're awake enough to text, they're awake enough to answer. Call it on speaker. I called. It rang once. Twice. Then it went to voicemail without the usual recorded greeting, just a dead air hiss for a beat, then a click. Like the line had been picked up and hung up fast. Marco made a soft noise, like a laugh he swallowed. Eddie's jaw worked. Okay, fine, cancel it. We don't take ghost orders. My phone buzzed while he said it. No calls. I said text only. Bring it. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Like I was already on the road. Like they'd been watching our little debate through the glass. I forced myself to look at the CCTV again, like proof would be waiting. Still just rain, slick pavement, and the jittery neon reflection. No hooded man. No one lingering by the door. See, Marco said quickly. That's not normal. That's not a customer. Eddie pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. We've had weird customers, he muttered, but his voice wasn't committed. We've had people who don't want to talk. Not like that, Marco said. I felt the stupidest thought crawl into my mind. What if they're inside the shop? And I checked behind the soda fridge, the hallway toward the bathroom, even though there was nowhere to hide that didn't also smell like mop water. Nothing. My phone buzzed again. Leave it at the door. Don't knock. Cash under mat. Eddie snatched the ticket and studied the address again, lips moving as if sounding it out would make it behave. That's near Grove Park, he said. A couple miles. You can be there in 10 if the lights are kind. I didn't like how specific it suddenly was. Not somewhere in town, but a route I could picture. Left out of the lot, down the main road with the always broken pedestrian signal, past the petrol station that smelled like wet pennies, then the darker residential stretch where the streetlights had gaps. Why does the city field blank out like that? I asked, mostly to hear my own voice doing something logical. Eddie shrugged. POS does that when the address is pulled from saved data wrong. Like if someone autofills but deletes half, could be a busted app. Marco shook his head hard. Nah, the number knows you're standing here. It knew extra crispy. It knew it's on the ticket, Eddie snapped, then immediately regretted the snap. He lowered his volume. Look, we can refuse it, that's fine. But if it's legit, it's money and it's easy. My private fear being seen, being put in an awkward spot I couldn't smooth over came alive in a new shape. Because if this was a scam and I showed up like an idiot, I'd have to stand on someone's porch at 1 a.m. with a pizza box, texting a stranger who refused calls. If it was a prank, I'd be the punchline. And if it wasn't a prank, then I was about to walk into whatever it actually was. Eddie seemed to read my hesitation like a weather report. Listen, he said, softer. If you don't want it, I'll do it. I'm not making you. Marco cut in. Not going alone, he said, surprising both of us. He lifted his chin like he decided to be brave on purpose. We can both go. 2 people is safer. Eddie barked a humorless laugh. 2 people in 1 scooter, Marco gestured toward my car keys on the counter. He's got the Fiesta. I did. A dented Ford Fiesta that smelled faintly of stale fries, no matter how many air fresheners I sacrificed. Eddie looked between us, weighing. His practical side and his tired side argued silently. The tired side lost. Fine, Eddie said. Ben drives, Marco rides along. You keep the doors locked. You don't go into any building. You drop it, you take cash, you leave. If anything feels wrong, you're out. No hero stuff. Marco nodded too fast. Yeah, I didn't nod. I stared at my phone and typed back on the way. Confirm you'll leave cash under mat. What name is the order under? A response came almost immediately. Hannah. Just that. No last name. No emoji. No, thanks. It felt like someone throwing a pebble at a window, then stepping back into the dark. Eddie pointed a finger at my screen. Okay, Hannah, that's a name, human enough. Not really, Marco murmured. I slid the pizza into a delivery bag. The Velcro rasped loud in the warm kitchen. Eddie handed Marco a small torch from the junk drawer and a battered metal clipboard like we were going to do a survey. For the cash, Eddie said, if there's money, you put it in the bag and come straight back. Don't count it on the porch like a tourist. He hesitated, then grabbed my phone and tapped a few things. Share location with me and keep it on. Battery. 70, I said. Good. He handed it back and stared at us both with the expression of a man who'd rather be annoyed than worried. Text me when you're there. Text me when you leave. Marco and I stepped outside. The cold hit first, then the wet. The rain had turned from needles to a steady sheet, that made the car park shine like black glass. The strip mall lights blurred in the puddles. Somewhere down the road, a siren wailed far away, not urgent in our direction. The sound stretched thin by weather and distance. As I unlocked the Fiesta, the key fob clicked weakly, like it was tired too. We got in. The inside smelled like damp fabric and old takeaway bags. The windows fogged almost instantly from our breath. Marco buckled fast. "This is dumb," he said, half joking. "We should have just canceled." "Yep," I said, and started the engine. The radio came on to static because I'd left it that way. I turned it off. Silence in a car isn't silence. It's the soft rumble of the engine, the hiss of rain on the roof, the wipers complaining in a steady rhythm. We pulled out, tires slushing through shallow water. "Do you think that guy in the hood?" Marco started. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe he was just a guy." Marco stared out the side window. He looked at the ticket, though. "Lots of people look at counters," I said, and it sounded weak to my own ears. We drove past the laundrette, past the dark bedding shop, past the petrol station where a lone man stood under the awning, head down, lit blue by his phone screen. I caught myself scanning faces like I expected the hooded guy to appear in every reflection. At a red light, my phone buzzed again on the center console. "You took too long." My hands tightened on the wheel. Then, as the light turned green, another message landed. "Wrong car." I glanced at Marco. He'd seen it too. His mouth opened, then shut. The color drained from his cheeks in a way that made him look suddenly younger. "How?" he started. I didn't answer, because the answer was either obvious and bad or complicated and worse. The engine gave a small cough. The dashboard lights flickered once, like a blink. And then, as we turned onto the darker residential road, the one with missing streetlights, the Fiesta lurched, and the steering went heavy in my hands, like someone had grabbed the front wheels and decided to test my strength. "Ben," Marco said, sharp now. "What's happening?" I eased off the accelerator. The car shuddered. A warning icon flashed battery, then engine, then the whole dash went dim. The engine died. For a second, we rolled on momentum, rain pattering louder without the motor under it. Wipers slowed, smeared water across the windshield, then stopped mid-swipe like an arm frozen in the air. We coasted to the curb under a broken streetlight. The only illumination came from a distant amber lamp further down, making everything between us and it looked like a tunnel. Marco's voice came out thin. "Your car just died." "I know," I said, already twisting the key again. Nothing, not even a click. My phone buzzed one more time, screen lighting up the dark interior. "Don't turn around." Marco's breathing went audible, quick little pulls. "Ben," he whispered, "why would it say that?" I stared at the windshield, at the rain sliding down like it had nowhere else to go, and felt a new kind of time pressure clamp onto the moment. Not the customer's 10 minutes, but the fact that we were now stopped, unlit, on a road with gaps in visibility, with a pizza order in our lap, and a stranger who seemed to know details they shouldn't. Behind us, somewhere in the rain, tires hissed on wet asphalt. A car slowing, close, and the choice that had felt optional in the shop suddenly didn't. The car behind us turned out to be a delivery van. It rolled past slow, headlights diffused into pale smears by the rain, tires whispering instead of roaring. The driver didn't look at us, just another late-night worker heading home, insulated in his own bubble. When the red tail lights shrank into the dark, Marco let out a breath he'd been holding long enough to make his shoulders shake. "Okay," he said. "Okay, not that." My hands were still locked around the wheel. I forced them to loosen one finger at a time. The interior smelled sharper now, like damp carpet and ozone from dying electronics. First attempt, the obvious one. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. No click, no cough, just the hollow sense of turning a dead thing. The dash stayed dark, the radio a blank rectangle. Outside, rain filled the silence. "Pop the hood," Marco said. "Maybe it's just the battery." I knew enough about cars to know that just the battery, at 1 a.m. on a half-lit road, wasn't comforting. But it was something to do. I grabbed the torch Eddie had given Marco and stepped out into the rain. It soaked my hair instantly, ran down the back of my neck. The road sloped gently downward toward the amber streetlight we'd seen earlier, then dipped into darkness again. Houses sat back from the curb on both sides, most of them blacked out, curtains drawn, the occasional blue glow of a TV flickering behind glass. I popped the hood. Steam didn't billow. Nothing dramatic happened at all. Just an engine bay slick with rain and grime, cables and metal gleaming dully under the weak beam of the torch. Marco leaned out the passenger door, hugging himself against the cold. "See anything?" "Not really," I said. "Battery looks there." I jiggled a cable. It didn't magically fix anything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it because the idea of looking at another message right then made my stomach clench. That felt like control, at least choosing not to look. We stood there longer than we should have, pretending mechanical insight would materialize if we stared hard enough. My fingers went numb. Rain dripped off the hood in a steady, irritating rhythm. "Ben," Marco said quietly, "we should call Eddie." I tried, I said, because I had. The call had gone straight to voicemail, probably him stepping into the walk-in freezer, or the building's spotty reception doing its thing. Still explainable. Still normal. Second attempt. Movement. We closed the hood and got back in, slamming the doors against the rain. I wiped my hands on my jeans, leaving dark streaks. "Maybe we can push it," Marco said. "Get it closer to the light, or at least out of the road." I nodded. Adrenaline makes bad ideas feel reasonable. We got out again, boots splashing. The Fiesta was angled slightly toward the curb already. We put our shoulders to the back and pushed. The car resisted like it had opinions. My shoes slipped on wet asphalt. Marco grunted, breath fogging. After a few shuddering feet, it rolled slow, heavy, but it rolled. We guided it until the front bumper kissed the curb under the broken streetlight, the amber glow now a little closer, a little kinder. We collapsed back into the seats, soaked and panting. "That's something," Marco said, trying to sound upbeat. His teeth chattered. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. "You're stopped." I typed back before I could talk myself, revealing anything. "Car trouble. We're delayed." The response came fast enough to feel like an interruption. "Walk it." Marco stared at the screen. "No," he said, immediate and firm. "Absolutely not." "How far is it?" I asked, hating myself for asking. I pulled up the map. The blue dot pulsed where we sat, an island of light in a dark grid. The address, Hannah's address, was less than half a mile away, deeper into the residential pocket. A cluster of short streets, cul-de-sacs branching like fingers, narrow, quiet, 10 minutes on foot. Less if you hurried. "I'm not walking into that," Marco said, "with a pizza, with some stranger watching our dot move." I shared his instinct. Every part of me wanted to lock the doors and wait for daylight, or at least for Eddie to answer. But another part, the part that hated unfinished, awkward situations, kept tallying the facts. The car was dead, rain wasn't stopping, and sitting here made us visible in a different way. A stalled car under a broken streetlight was a beacon to anyone bored or curious enough to notice. My phone buzzed again. Leave it at the door. Money under mat. I said text only. Why does it care so much about how we deliver it? Marco asked. Why not just cancel? Because then it wouldn't be about the pizza anymore, I thought. It would be about us. Third attempt, delegation. I texted Eddie again. Car died near Grove Park. Engine won't start. We're safe but stuck. Can you call a tow or come get us? The message sent. No reply. Marco rubbed his arms. If we walk, we don't take the pizza, he said. Right. We leave it here. We go to the nearest house, knock like normal humans, ask for help. I pictured knocking on a stranger's door at 1 a.m., rain-soaked, explaining why I was there. The thought made my chest tighten. Awkwardness again, ridiculous, that it still mattered, even now. Before I could answer, a shape moved at the end of the street. My heart spiked. Marco sucked in a breath. A figure stepped into the edge of the amber light. Hood up, tall, thin. For one awful second, my brain stitched it together. The hooded man from the shop, the texts, the wrong car. It felt like confirmation. Then the figure raised an arm, and the light caught reflective strips on a jacket. A dog barked a sharp, excited sound, and a leash went taut. A jogger, or a dog walker. Middle-aged, male, head down against the rain. He glanced at us, frowned briefly in that way people do when they clock something unusual, but decide it's not their problem, and continued on, dog's paws slapping wet pavement. Marco laughed, breathless and shaky. Jesus, misdirection. Explained. My pulse took longer to come down, but the damage was done. My nerves felt sanded raw. We can't just sit here, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Battery's dead. Eddie's not answering. If we wait, we're just waiting. For what? Marco asked. I didn't answer, because I didn't like any of the options. I checked the map again. 1/2 mile. The route threaded past 3 intersections, then turned onto a cul-de-sac. Trees clustered thick there, their branches knitting overhead. The satellite view showed a narrow footpath connecting the cul-de-sac to the next street over an alley that cut between back gardens. A shortcut. My phone buzzed, as if responding to the thought. Use the path. Faster. Marco saw it. No, he said, louder this time. How does it know about the path? I stared at the screen. The rain tapped insistently on the roof, 1,000 tiny fingers. Somewhere, a fox screamed, the sound startling and human enough to raise goosebumps. We're not using any shortcut, I said, and felt a thin thread of resolve harden. If we walk the main road. Or we don't walk at all, Marco said, another vibration. Different this time. Eddie calling. I answered instantly. Eddie, where are you? He demanded, the background noise of the shop loud in his ear, oven hiss, radio chatter. Near Grove Park. Car died. Shit, he said. Okay, I can't leave right now, Marco, you there? I'm here, Marco said, leaning close. Listen, Eddie said. I called the number. My stomach dropped. You what? It didn't ring, he said. It connected, silent. Then someone breathed, not heavy, just there. I hung up. Marco swore under his breath. I'm sending a tow, Eddie went on, talking fast now. But it'll take time. If you feel unsafe, we already do, Marco said. Eddie exhaled. Then lock yourselves in and wait. Do not walk. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. You can't wait. A new message followed before I could react. I see the car. I twisted in my seat, scanning mirrors, the dark road behind us, the hedges lining the houses. Rain distorted everything. Shadows pooled where the streetlight failed. "I don't see anyone," Marco said, but his voice had gone small. Typed with stiff fingers, "Where are you?" The reply took longer this time, long enough for hope to flicker. Then, almost there, a sound came from outside, soft, close, footsteps in water, slow, measured. They stopped near the rear of the car. Marco's hand found my sleeve. "Ben," he whispered, "someone's behind us." I checked the mirrors. Rain-smeared glass showed nothing but our own pale faces. Another step, closer. The choice vanished. Waiting wasn't passive anymore, it was an invitation. I unlocked my door. "What are you doing?" Marco hissed. "We're not sitting here," I said. My voice shook despite me. "We go to the nearest house. Lights on or off, I don't care. We make noise. We get help." I grabbed the pizza bag, not because I thought we'd deliver it, but because it felt wrong to leave it, like leaving a piece of ourselves behind. As I opened the door, the footsteps paused. The rain seemed to hold its breath. And once we stepped out, once the door shut behind us, there was no retreat, no car to shelter in, no pretending this was still just a broken down delivery. We were committed to being seen. We moved like we'd agreed on a plan, even though we hadn't. Ben, me went first, because I'd opened the door, and that apparently meant I was the one deciding things now. Marco stayed half a step behind, torch in his hand, the beam jittering across wet pavement and hedges. The pizza bag bumped my leg with each step, absurd and heavy. The nearest house was maybe 30 yards up the street on the right, a narrow semi with a low brick wall and a hedge that had grown shaggy, spilling into the sidewalk. No lights, no porch lamp, just a black rectangle of windows. "Maybe pick one with lights on," Marco hissed. "There aren't any," I whispered back. Footsteps behind us, not rushing, not calling out, just the soft splash of someone taking their time. I kept walking, faster but not running. Running would announce panic, and panic was its own kind of invitation. We reached the gate. It squealed when I pushed it open, high and metallic, loud in the rain. I almost wanted it loud. I wanted neighbors to hear, dogs to bark, curtains to twitch. I rapped on the door with my knuckles, hard, no sound inside, no movement. "Try another," Marco said, voice cracking. Another step behind us. I turned, torchlight spilling over the street. Rain turned everything into a smear of gray. At first I saw nothing. Then, in the strip of amber light from the distant lamp, I caught the outline of a hooded figure standing near the back of my car. Still, patient. "Oi," I called, voice louder than I meant. "Can we help you?" The figure didn't answer. Marco's hand clamped my arm. "Ben, please." My phone buzzed in my pocket, vibrating against my thigh like a trapped insect. I didn't look, but I knew it would be the same thread, the same flat commands. I tried the doorbell. It was one of those cheap plastic ones, probably dead. I knocked again, and this time I heard something inside, movement, slow, like someone shifting in bed, deciding whether the world was worth waking up for. A light flicked on behind the frosted glass, warm yellow. Relief hit me so hard my knees loosened. The door opened a crack. A chain held it. A man's face appeared, puffy with sleep and suspicion, gray stubble on his jaw. He blinked rain out of his eyelashes and stared at us like we'd crawled out of a ditch. Gareth Mills, 52, male, stood behind the chained door, wearing a faded t-shirt and plaid pajama bottoms. His eyes went from my soaked hoodie to Marco's torch to the pizza bag, and his expression tightened instead of softening. "What the hell?" he said, voice low. "It's 1 a.m. "My car broke down," I said quickly. "Sorry, really. We're from the pizza place down on the main road. We need help." I swallowed, hating the word. "Someone's out there." Gareth's gaze flicked past us down the street. He didn't open the chain. Smart. "I don't see anyone," he said. "He's by our car," Marco blurted. "We got texts. He knows where we are." Gareth's mouth tightened further, the way adults do when teenagers say something that sounds dramatic. "Texts from who?" I dug my phone out and held it up, screen bright in the rain. "The unknown number, the messages, wrong car. Use the path." "I see the car." Gareth leaned closer without opening the door further. His eyes narrowed at the screen, not at the words at the number. "That's local," he murmured. "What?" I said. He didn't answer. He looked down the street again, longer this time. Then he unhooked the chain. "Get in," he said. We didn't hesitate. Marco practically tripped over the threshold. I followed, dragging the pizza bag like a stupid talisman. Gareth slammed the door and turned the deadbolt with a solid, satisfying clunk. Inside smelled like radiator heat and old coffee. A hallway cluttered with shoes, an umbrella stand, a framed photo on the wall of a man holding a golden retriever. The TV in the living room was on mute, flickering blue. Gareth grabbed a set of keys from a hook and shoved them into his pocket. "Stay here," he said, already moving toward the front window. He peeked through a gap in the curtains. Marco's voice shook. "Don't go out there. Not leaving you in my house with some unknown situation outside and doing nothing," Gareth said. He said it like a man who'd been responsible for things for too long. He glanced at the pizza bag in my hand and made a face. "Put that down." I set it on the floor, the smell of pepperoni briefly blooming in the warm air, ridiculous and normal. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. "Nice house." The words punched all the air out of my chest. "He knows we're inside," I whispered. Marco's eyes widened. "Out there's," Gareth held up a hand for silence, his gaze still fixed on the street. "Shut up," he mouthed, not unkindly, just urgent. He angled his body so he could see the same strip of road through the curtain gap. At first, nothing. Then the hooded figure stepped into view, closer than before, moving with that same unhurried confidence. He stopped beside my Fiesta's driver's side door and leaned down, like he was inspecting the lock. Marco made a sound in his throat. Gareth muttered, "Christ." The figure straightened and calmly lifted something. My pizza delivery bag. The one I'd left in the car when I ran to Gareth's door. No, I'd brought it. It was inside. So what was he lifting? A second bag, Eddie's spare thermal bag that I kept in the back seat, empty, crumpled. He held it up, looked at it like it meant something, then tossed it onto the road. Then he walked to the passenger side, to where Marco had been sitting. He tried the handle. Once. Twice. It didn't open, but the attempt was casual, like testing a door in your own house. Gareth's jaw clenched. He pulled his phone out. "Police," he whispered, and started dialing. My phone buzzed again. "No police, text only." Gareth froze with his thumb over the call button, staring at my screen in my hand as if it had become a live wire. He didn't hit call. He didn't hang up. He just stood there, caught between choices. "Call them," I said, voice thin. "Please." Gareth swallowed and pressed call. Outside, the hooded figure turned his head sharp, sudden toward Gareth's house, toward our window. I felt the irrational certainty of being seen through brick and rain. The figure lifted his own phone to his ear, and then Gareth's phone went dead in his hand. Not the call failing dead, screen black. What the Gareth shook it, pressed the side button. Nothing. He looked at us, disbelief flashing into anger. It was charged. Marco grabbed his own phone from his pocket. Mine's, he pressed the screen. Black. He looked at me, terrified. My battery was full. I checked mine, still on, still vibrating with another incoming message. Your phones are off now. Gareth's breathing got heavier. How is he doing that? I didn't have a clever answer. I had a throat that wanted to close. Outside, the hooded figure walked away from the car and toward the houses, head down, moving along the sidewalk with purpose now. Not slow anymore. Not patient. Decided. Toward Gareth's gate. Gareth backed away from the window. Kitchen, he said, voice suddenly very controlled. Back of the house. Now we moved. Gareth grabbed something from a drawer as we passed, an old heavy torch, the kind with metal ridges, more club than flashlight. He shoved it into my hands. Do you have a back door? I asked. Yeah, he snapped. But it opens to the garden, fences, wet, hard to climb. Marco looked like he might cry. We can't stay here. We reached the kitchen. A small room, linoleum floor, sink full of dishes. A back door with a frosted window. Rain streaked down it too. The garden beyond was a dark blur. Gareth yanked open a cabinet and pulled out a small red tin. First aid kit. He shoved it onto the counter like it might be needed in minutes rather than hours. Then the front doorbell rang. Not our broken one. Gareth S. Loud, clean, insistent. Marco flinched so hard he hit his hip on the counter. The bell rang again. Longer. Gareth, a voice called from outside. Male. Close. Calm. It wasn't muffled much by the door. It carried like someone standing right there, hand on the frame. Gareth went pale. How does he know my name? My stomach twisted. The photo in the hallway, Gareth with the dog, the frame on the wall. Easy to read if someone had looked through the window earlier. Or the name on a letterbox. Or the voice came again, almost friendly. Gareth, open up. I just want my pizza. A laugh bubbled out of Marco, one sharp, panicked sound. What the Gareth lifted a finger to his lips, eyes wide, telling us to shut up again. He grabbed a chair and dragged it to the back door with a scraping screech that sounded too loud in the small room. He climbed onto it and shoved at the tiny top window latch. Can you get out? I whispered. Maybe, Gareth whispered back, straining. The latch resisted. He swore under his breath. The front bell rang a third time. Then the voice changed, still controlled, but colder. Gareth, don't make me knock. I'm sorry, Gareth whispered, not to us, to himself. He got the latch open. Cold air knifed in. Rain spattered the sill. He pushed the small window outward. It's not big enough, Marco hissed. It's big enough for you, Gareth snapped, and Marco stared at him like he'd been slapped. The voice from the front door, last chance. Something thudded against the front of the house. Not a kick. A heavy, deliberate hit, like a shoulder checking the door to see what it would take. Gareth looked at me. You, he said. Help him. I climbed onto the chair, grabbed Marco under the arms, and hauled him up. He wriggled, breath ragged, trying to fold himself through the small opening. His jacket snagged. He cursed, quiet and desperate. Go, Gareth hissed. Another thud from the front. The doorframe groaned. Marco got his shoulders through, then his torso, then his hips with a wet scramble. He dropped out of sight into the garden with a muffled grunt. My turn. I shoved my upper body through. The sill bit into my ribs. Rain soaked my shirt instantly. I twisted, felt something tear, fabric, maybe skin, and then I was half out, legs still inside, kicking for purchase. A crash from the front of the house, wood splintering, a sound so final it made Marco scream outside. Gareth grabbed my ankles. "Move," he barked and shoved. Hard. My legs slid, my knee slammed into the frame, pain white and immediate. I bit down on a shout. Then I was out, dropping into the garden on muddy ground, hands catching my fall, palms stinging. Rolled and looked up. Gareth was still inside, still on the chair. He reached for the latch, trying to pull the window closed behind us. And then, from inside the house, a new sound, footsteps in the hallway, fast, wet, coming toward the kitchen. Gareth's eyes met mine through the rain-streaked frosted glass. He looked older in that second, tired, furious at himself, furious at the world. He shoved at the window one last time, but it didn't catch. The latch slipped. The kitchen door banged open. Gareth turned. The figure stepped in, hood still up, rain dripping from the edge like a slow leak. I couldn't see his face clearly through the frosted pane, but I saw the shape of his arm lift. Gareth lunged. There was a sharp crack, metal on something hard. Gareth's heavy torch, I realized a fraction too late. He de-swung first. The figure stumbled back. Then Gareth made a sound, short, involuntary, and folded at the waist. A knife, small, quick, not cinematic, just a glint and a sudden collapse of breath. Gareth hit the floor out of view. Marco grabbed my sleeve in the garden, yanking me backward. "Ben, move." We ran along the slick grass, shoes sinking, fence boards looming ahead. Gareth had been right. The fences were tall, wet, hard to climb. Ivy and moss made them slippery. My knee screamed with every step, the impact from the window still blooming into real pain. Behind us, inside the house, something smashed, glass maybe. A back door handle rattled. We reached the fence. I jumped, grabbed the top, and my hand slipped. Mud, rain, panic. Marco tried beside me and slid down with a helpless sob. The back door of Gareth's house burst open. We froze, caught in the garden like rats in a sink. The hooded figure stepped out into the rain, scanning. He wasn't huge, not a movie monster, just a man in a dark jacket, holding something close to his body. His movements were efficient now, not theatrical. He looked at the fence, then at us, and his head tilted slightly, as if considering the work involved. I did the only thing I could think of, improvised, desperate. I grabbed the pizza bag from where I'd dropped it earlier by the kitchen window. Somehow it had landed outside when we shoved through, splattered with mud. I yanked it open, pulled out the hot box. The smell hit the rain like a flare. "Hey," I shouted, voice cracking. "You want it? Take it." The figure's attention snapped to me. I hurled the pizza box, not at his face, but to the side, over the fence line where the garden met the alley. It slapped against wood and landed with a soggy cardboard thump, sliding out of sight. For 1 second, the man's gaze followed it on instinct. That second was everything. "Now," I yelled, and threw myself at the fence again. This time, I dug my fingers into a rough knot in the wood, found a purchase, hauled. Pain ripped through my knee, but adrenaline bulleted aside. I got one leg over, then the other, and dropped into the alley on the far side, landing hard and nearly collapsing. Marco scrambled after me, panting, slipping, but he made it by inches, falling into the alley beside me with a wet smack. We ran. The alley was narrow, lined with wheelie bins, slick bricks underfoot. The rain sounded different between fences, more enclosed, louder, like someone pouring water into a metal trough. We burst out onto the next street, stumbling onto a wider road with actual streetlights and a bus stop shelter. A car passed, headlights, real people inside. I waved both arms like an idiot, like I wanted to be seen more than I'd ever wanted anything. The car slowed. A woman rolled down her window a crack. "Are you okay?" she called. I heard myself say, "Call the police," in a voice that didn't sound like mine. Behind us, at the mouth of the alley, the hooded figure appeared just for a moment, standing under the weak light, rain slicking his shoulders. He didn't chase. He didn't need to. He just looked at us like he was memorizing. Then he stepped back into the dark. The woman's eyes widened. She fumbled for her phone. "I'm calling," she said, voice trembling. Marco sank onto the curb, shaking so hard his whole body rattled. I tried to stand still, but my knee buckled and I had to grab the bus stop pole, metal cold and steady under my fingers. Somewhere behind us, in Gareth's house, a TV still flickered on mute. And Gareth, who'd opened his door, who tried to do the right thing, was alone on a kitchen floor because we had brought the wrong kind of attention to the wrong street. The conflict was over in the only way it could be over. Not clean, not fair, just finished enough to leave us breathing. But I knew, with the same sick certainty as the earlier texts, that whatever had happened tonight would not stay neatly inside tonight. Not in my head, not in Marco's, not in the quiet, wet grid of those streets. The police arrived in pieces, not all at once. First, a patrol car, lights washing the wet street blue and white. Then an ambulance that pulled up crooked back doors, swinging open, while rain pattered uselessly on its roof. Then another car, and another, radios hissing with half-finished sentences. Night filled with purposeful noise, and in doing so, took something away from the fear. Not erased it, just pushed it back enough to breathe. Marco sat on the curb under the bus stop shelter, wrapped in a foil blanket someone had pressed around his shoulders. He hadn't stopped shaking. Not the dramatic kind, just a constant, fine tremor, like a phone buzzing on silent. A paramedic knelt in front of him, asking the same questions twice, gently, because Marco kept drifting. Name, Marco. Age, 19. Do you know where you are? Marco nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. I was on the edge of the scene, leaning against a signpost, my knee wrapped tight and throbbing in a way that felt deep and structural. Every time I shifted my weight, white sparks bloomed behind my eyes. A paramedic had told me it probably wasn't broken, probably, and that word echoed louder than it should have. Someone had given me a cup of tea. I hadn't asked for it. I kept forgetting to drink it, then remembering and burning my tongue. "Ben," a voice said. I looked up. Eddie stood there, hair plastered to his forehead, jacket half-zipped like he'd thrown it on while running. His eyes were wide, unfocused, scanning me for damage like he was doing inventory. "Jesus," he breathed. "Jesus Christ." He didn't hug me. Instead, he put his hands on my shoulders, firm, grounding, like he was making sure I was still solid. "You okay?" Nodded because that was easier than answering honestly. "They took him out," Eddie said quietly. "The guy from the house. Gareth," I swallowed. "Is he alive?" Eddie said quick. "He's alive, lost a lot of blood. Knife nicked something important, but they got pressure on it fast. He's in surgery now." The relief was physical, a sag through my chest that almost took my legs with it. Alive wasn't safe. Alive wasn't fine. But alive was something. A police officer approached then, notebook already damp from rain. She introduced herself, name slipping past me, and started asking questions that felt both too simple and impossibly large. When did you first receive the messages? Did you recognize the number? Can you describe the suspect? I did my best. Hood, dark jacket. Average height, male. My descriptions felt flimsy even as I said them, like I was trying to describe a dream that didn't want to stay still. Marco was questioned separately. I could hear his voice rising, then cracking, then flattening into something almost mechanical. He told the story the way you might read instructions. First this happened, then this, then this. No adjectives, no emotion. Like if he kept it factual, it wouldn't be able to hurt him again. An officer asked to see my phone. I hesitated, just a second too long. Please, she said, not unkindly. I handed it over. She scrolled through the thread, rainwater beating on the screen, her expression tightening line by line. Did you respond to all of these? She asked. Yes, I said. I mean most of them. Did the suspect ever identify himself? No. Did he threaten you directly? I thought of don't turn around. Of your phones are off now. Of Gareth's name spoken from behind a door. Yes, I said finally. But not directly. She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. The Fiesta was towed an hour later, dragged onto the flatbed like a wounded animal. The driver clicked his tongue sympathetically and said something about alternators and bad luck. He didn't know he was talking about more than the car. By the time the street started to empty, the rain had eased into a thin mist that made everything glow. Police tape fluttered uselessly around Gareth's gate. His front door hung crooked on its hinges, splintered wood raw and pale where it had given way. I couldn't stop looking at it. Ben, Eddie said, following my gaze. Don't. My voice caught stupidly. He opened the door. Eddie didn't say anything for a moment. Then, Marco was taken home by his sister. She arrived in a fury at the world, at me, at Eddie, at the rain, and bundled him into her car like he might disappear if she let go. He didn't look back when they drove off. I went to the hospital for my knee because the pain had stopped being negotiable. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, a familiar purgatory. I sat there in wet clothes, shivering, filling out forms with a pen that barely worked. A nurse asked me what happened. My car broke down, I said, and then, because it felt wrong to lie even a little, I added, and then some other stuff. She smiled faintly. That's usually how it goes. They wrapped my knee properly, told me to rest, to ice it, to come back if it swelled or changed color. They used words like strain and soft tissue damage. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that matched how it felt to put weight on it. Before I left, I asked quietly how the man from the house was doing. The nurse checked a screen. Still in surgery, she said, but stable. I thanked her for answering, even though she hadn't needed thanks. It was nearly dawn when Eddie drove me home. The city looked different in that gray hour, scrubbed and ordinary. Delivery vans replaced police cars. People in gym clothes jogged past without looking at us. Somewhere, someone was opening a cafe. You can take time off, Eddie said as we pulled up outside my building. Paid, don't argue. I didn't have the energy to argue. At my door, he hesitated. You did what you could, he said. You know that, right? I nodded, but the thought lodged somewhere uncomfortable. What you could didn't feel like enough. It never does. Inside my flat, everything was exactly where I'd left it. Shoes by the door. Sink half full of dishes. The quiet hum of the fridge. It felt like walking into a photograph of my own life. I showered. The water stung my scraped hands. Purple bruises were already blooming along my ribs and knee abstract maps I didn't remember drawing. When I turned the water off, the silence pressed in again. I sat on my bed and finally, deliberately, opened the message thread one more time. No new messages, no typing bubbles, just the same short commands, frozen in time. I blocked the number, then I deleted it. Then I checked the trash and deleted it again. Sleep came in pieces. I dreamed of doorbells and phones vibrating against my leg. I woke to daylight and the sound of someone downstairs dragging bins to the curb. Later that day, afternoon, according to my phone, Eddie texted, "Marco's okay. Shaken, but home. Hospital says Gareth made it through surgery." I exhaled and typed back, "Thank you." The police called the next day. They decanvassed the area, found a neighbor's camera that caught a hooded figure walking through the street hours earlier. No clear face, no plates. They said the phone interference was unusual, but not impossible. Signal jammers existed, small ones, cheap ones. The number was prepaid, purchased locally. No name attached. "We're treating it as an aggravated assault and stalking," the officer said. "We'll be in touch." They were twice more, each time the same careful phrases. No suspect identified. No arrest. Week later, I drove past Gareth Street on purpose. The door was fixed. New wood, unpainted, standing out like a fresh scar. A small bouquet of flowers sat on the step, wilted but still trying. I didn't stop. I didn't know what I would say if I did. I quit night shifts. That part was easy. Eddie understood without comment. Marco didn't come back at all. I heard he'd enrolled in a course, something far from kitchens and late hours. I couldn't blame him. Life filled in around the edges again. Rent, groceries, the dull comfort of routine. The city smoothed itself over as cities do. But sometimes, when my phone buzzes unexpectedly, my body reacts before my mind does. A jolt, a tightening, a brief, irrational certainty that someone is paying attention again. And once, only once, I could swear my phone vibrated late at night, long after I'd blocked and deleted everything. When I checked it, there was nothing there. Just my reflection in the dark screen, looking older than I remembered. The shadows fade for now, but the stories never end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and join our community of horror lovers. If you're hungry for more, check out the next video. Just remember, the scariest part is often the one you don't see coming.